going to change my life. So we're going to go on a little tour of the past and then into the future. This is a little bit about me. You can see various pictures of me. I actually started as a reenactor. When my boys were young, I wanted something to do with them. So I went along to a reenactment and they invited me to join the society. And I said, well, you'll never get me dressing up, get lost, forget it. As you can see, it didn't last. So because the boys were so young, I had to give myself a role. So I said I'd be a 17th century embroideress. And then I started looking for embroidery threads that were appropriate for the 17th century. Couldn't find any, so realised I'd have to learn how to produce them. So I started spinning silk and then dyeing my own, and my first efforts were absolutely incredible. They are well hidden away in some cupboard somewhere. They're getting them out again. But I was spotted by somebody who was working at the V&A, doing all the work on the new modern galleries, and they were dressing the Great Bed of Ware. So all the hangings, all the bed coverlets, everything was done traditionally as it would have been done at the time. And I was asked to produce all the blackwork silks for the embroidery. I didn't do the hangings, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I mean, I'm not sure I had the facilities to dye that sort of amount as well. But I did all the blackwork silks, and that then started me going down the route of having a business. And so I became Mistress Deborah, the medieval dyer, because that's the period of history that actually interests me the most. And there you can see me in my medieval costume, which I'll be wearing next week actually at Leeds University. So that's a treat for some of the people at university. So, history. The earliest known textile to date that has dye on it is the one at the top there that's blue. Indigo being the most difficult dye to get on a fabric. That's the earliest one we've got samples of. You probably all recognise the Bayeux tapestry. Been around for 1,000 years, still got colour. Show me a synthetic dye that's been around that long and still got colour. So it's quite hard to know exactly when we started having a commercial dye trade, you know, a proper industry where somebody was qualified to be a dyer. We had guilds set up from, well, we know we had guilds in the 12th century, the 1100s, because we've got their charters from King Edward I. On the left-hand side there, you can see the Worshipful Company of Dyers. They're based down in London, obviously. They're one of the livery companies. They are one of the early ones. Very sadly, their first Dyers Hall got burnt down in the 1660s in the Great Fire of London. And so we lost all the early records of the dyers that we had then. So we have to go by what we can find in various records around the local archives and things. They have got a lot of records, obviously, since that time, but the early ones we've lost. There's a lot of information coming out of the Dyers archives. There's a lot of information coming out of archives all over the place. You'll see some nice ones in a minute. On the right-hand side, you've got sumptuary law issued by Queen Elizabeth I. The kings and queens controlled what we were wearing, how we were wearing it, what type of cloth, how the cloth was produced. All kinds of information was under control. Nobody beneath an earl could wear purple, for example. I know we talk about the Romans having purple, but actually it applied for us in England as well. I say England because Scotland had different laws in that period. Wales still came under as well. So that's just a small section of the sumptuary law. We have statutes. These are, I've got photocopies of the statutes, and then you can see I highlight the bits that I like. On the statutes, we've got, again, instructions to the dyers, the people who are actually employed. They have very clear instructions about what they can and can't do. This one says, no dyer nor any other person shall dye or cause to be dyed within this realm after the said feast, which will be the little bit in the side, any woolen cloth with orchil or cork called your cork, upon pain to forfeit and lose 40 shillings for every cloth that he or any other for him or to his use shall dye or cause to be dyed. 40 shillings was a heck of a lot of money. This was in 1483, issued by, it says it at the top, Richard III. I mean, the money they could lose. The seals on the right-hand side are called All-Nagers seals. I don't know if you've ever seen them. But the All-Nagers were kind of taxmen. They would literally go into the dye houses and they would look at the pieces of cloth and they would check that these statutes had been followed. And if there was the slightest mistake, away from what the statutes said, they wouldn't put a seal on it. And if they didn't put a seal on it, they took it away and confiscated it, and you lost that money. You lost the money for the wool, you lost the money for the dye stuffs. You had to be doing the job according to how it was given. To be a master dyer, of course, you'd gone through at least 14 years of training, working day and night in that dye house. You'd got 7 years as an apprentice and then 7 years as a journeyman. And the journeyman would travel around the country to different places to learn different techniques. If I said to you, I'm going to see if you can answer me now. Right, if I said to you, what colour does Coventry produce? What colour would you think it produces?
Orange.
No? Do you know, Stuart?
Oh.
Yeah, well, it's pinpoint it. No, it's true as Coventry blue. Coventry produced blue. How about York?
Brown.
They produce scarlet. But scarlet's a type of cloth. And the term scarlet comes from the fact that it was always dyed with kermes. And so the word for scarlet became used to describe the colour. And if anybody's interested later, I've got some kermes on the front here, which is the pre-16th century red beetle that we had in this country. So other towns were licensed. Oh, and I know one you'll know, Lincoln.
Green.
Yay! Okay, so we're going on a little trip to Italy now to meet my absolute favourite person from the Middle Ages. On the right, you can see the name of the book, The Merchant of Prato. Francesco di Marco Bettini was the Merchant of Prato, and he came from Prato, and he went off to Avignon, where the popes were at the time, in the 1360s and 70s, and he started trading. He wanted to trade in arms and armaments, and then he kind of increased that to being textiles, and then he increased that to actually, he came back to Prato and he got friendly with a dyer called Niccolo di Pietro, and they set up in business together. And so he actually had this dye house that was a part of his business. Now, the reason I am so keen on Francesco di Marco Bettini is he actually left all his documents to posterity. So there's 150,000 documents in that building in Prato, and anybody can go and look at them. It is the most amazing archive. But what's really special is these. The piece of cloth, or the 4 pieces of cloth on the left-hand side come from 1402, and the 2 on the right-hand side are 1398. And that is the colour they are now. I was there in 2018. And they are that intense. The interesting thing I find, or one of the interesting things I find, is you can very clearly see that they followed whatever the statute was for producing the green, because you can see the yellow at the top, and then the blue's gone over the top of the yellow. A lot of the statutes give it the other way around in England. A lot of them say that a cloth has to be woaded first, and then you put it into whatever colour you're going into afterwards. In Italy, they were clearly doing the yellow first, and then the blue over the top. But aren't those colours stunning? I mean, they're so rich, and then you can still see them. And the one on the left is actually not kept in the dark. It's on display out in the main archive. Oh, yes, and there's this bit. Who would like to try on the liripine? Anyone want to try on the liripine? There is a story that goes with it.
I don't know. I never.
Come on then.
Hannah will do it.
That beaten to it there.
You know it yet?
Just as a child. Right. What do you need me to do?
I'm just going to put it on your head. Okay. I love these. This is my favourite clothing. This was made for me by a friend. This is a medieval item of clothing. Tell me if I'm strangling you.
No worries, all good.
Okay. Isn't that practical? You've got a hood, you've got a cape, and you've got a scarf. The reason it's called a liripine is the scarfy bit. This is the liripine, yeah. And you see, if you look at medieval paintings, you see those hoods on absolutely everybody. The reason I've got it is a friend who makes these actually unrolled this bolt of cloth, and it is beautiful Prattese wool. And when she got to the end, it had a label that said made in Prato. She said I had to have it because it went with my hero. Okay.
Awesome.
I think we should go back into production of those. I think they're wonderful. You can get them with buttons down the front as well, so you can just put it on like a little bit. I think it's fabulous.
Yeah.
So, right. Better come forward a little bit. So, then, a little bit further forward in the 18th century, we get the French dyers, the ones who actually start looking at chemistry rather than passing the story on. They want to know what's going on in that dye vat. Monsieur Berthollet actually wrote his book, and he looks at the various chemicals that are there in the various plants. And we had something, it's very difficult to dye cellulose fibres, and in particular cotton. And the Indian chintzes had started coming in the 18th century. We were getting these really nice printed cloths. And so cotton was beginning to become much more popular. And there was a way of dyeing cotton that was incredibly stable. It's probably the most stable way of dyeing cotton with madder, with a red dye. And so they started investigating this process. It came out of India, it went to Turkey, and it was very big in Adrianople in Turkey, which modern day it's called Dyers, if you go there. And from Turkey, the Greeks stole it, because they're a bit like that, aren't they? So the Greeks stole the method, and then the Greeks came to France, and the French started looking at how to do this. So it started in Rouen, and the booklet on the right-hand side is from Rouen. I mean, you can see it's published in 1932, this particular booklet. But the industry became very, very popular, and it's called Turkey Red, this colour. The art of dyeing wool, silk and cotton Monsieur Le Pileux d'Apligny has put in that book the instructions for how to dye turkey red. So this is turkey red. The piece on the left I dyed is 6 metres of cotton cloth that I dyed turkey red. The little sample at the top is a sample in one of my dye books. And the two, the paisley print and the book at the bottom, they come from the Glasgow archives. Glasgow had, excuse me, I'm going to play minutes, sorry. I'm going to snivel all over you. We actually started in Manchester first with turkey red. And there was a couple of French guys came to Manchester, and another man called Papillon wanted to work with the Manchester dyers as well to do turkey red. But because the other two gentlemen had got there first, he went up to Glasgow, and the Turkey Red Company then started up, and there's a huge area in Glasgow now that was the Turkey Red Company. And their archive is held at Glasgow University, and they've got phenomenal amounts of information about it. But I'd like to say that the Society of Dyers and Colourists have got a lot of the Manchester stuff. They've certainly got an awful lot of samples of turkey red there, so it's well worth a visit if you're interested. But the thing about turkey red is it doesn't fade. And if you put nitric acid on it, the colour will stay for 10 minutes if it's dyed properly. The process takes a month. You start off by putting sheep dung on the cloth, then you have to oil it a minimum of 6 times, then you do a tanning mordant, then you do an alum mordant, and then you can think about doing the dyeing. And in between each stage, you have to dry it. So over a period of time, so you're talking about, kind of 3 days for each particular stage, which is why it takes about a month. When you get to the dyeing, you put the cloth in cold and then heat it up. And in the first half an hour, if you can feel the colour coming off on your fingers, and you look at your fingernails and they're going red, then it's not worked and you've got to start all over again at the beginning. It's a fascinating process and quite complex. So, what comes next? Right, so let's get to the modern day. So actually, I'm not an artist, I'm going to tell you. I have not got an artistic bone in my body. In fact, my art teacher said to me at the age of 14 when we had to choose our subjects, promise me you'll never do art again. And I never have. I don't go near art at all. You will not get me drawing anything or anything. I come from a different view to everybody else because I see natural dyes as a science. It is chemicals within each of these plants, insects, fungi, lichen, wherever we're getting them from. It is the chemicals that are actually doing the bonding to the chemicals in the fibres. And that is what we need to know about, and that's where we have to go to find out what is happening with natural dyes. As somebody said earlier, any plant will give you a colour. And most of them will give you yellow, but any plant will give you a colour, but very few of them will actually fix and give you a stable colour. So it's very important to learn the ones that will work and the ones that won't. Or you treat it as an art and you don't mind that it fades. But if you want to do the job and have a stable colour, you have to look at the science. So we're going to go through some science now. You're all going to learn some chemistry. So the first one is vat dyes, the second one is substantive dyes, and the third one is adjective dyes. And I will go through them and what they are. Vat dyes. Indigotin and 6,6-dibromo-indigotin are the only 2 vat dyes that are totally natural. And just in case you don't know what those are, everybody calls indigotin indigo. The actual dye chemical that we are working with is indigo tin. So, if anyone's interested, I've brought statues. Indigo tin. I haven't got any 6,6 Galbreno indigo tin, which is why I've got a photo. Historically, I'll come over here to show you this. So, historically, we used woad in Europe in this format. This is known as a woad ball. It looks like a piece of dung, really. But what it is the leaves that have been chopped up, squashed into a ball, and then dried. The reason that is done is they actually did understand a little bit of chemistry, even back in the early days. When you chop the leaves up, you're breaking the cell walls down. Within those cells, there is a precursor chemical, something that can be converted into the indigo tin, and a naturally occurring bacteria that helps that change to happen. So by squeezing them together, forming them into a ball and letting them dry, you're actually allowing that chemical change to happen. It will become a natural process within those balls. In India, South America and other places, there were different methods and different plants, but the same thing was happening. It was a precursor chemical and a naturally occurring bacteria that are within those leaves that become the indigo tin that we want to use. Indigo tin is blue, so there's some indigo tin, natural, actually from woad. So in that format, this powder format, it is much more stable, and I'm sure you can see there's a lot less plant matter. So that will dye better than that one. It's exactly the same colour, but it will give you more colour for your money. Indigo was loved when it came in, kind of, but they had a commercial side to it as well. So a lot of people, actually, a lot of the dyers, chose to add it, and the English dyers actually wrote to Queen Elizabeth I and asked permission to add indigo into the dye vat, whereas Scotland, Germany and other places were actually banning the use of indigo because they saw it as competition. They thought it was going to actually wipe out their woad crop growing. So even back in the 16th century, there was a commercial problem with indigo tin, and it was so necessary because it was the only blue. 6,6, I'm coming back over here now. 6,6 Dibromo indigo tin is Tyrian purple. It's the one that comes from the shellfish. I've never dyed with it. I doubt if I ever will dye with it. The price of it is incredible. Both of these you can obtain synthetically. So when Adolf von Baeyer synthesised indigo tin became cheaper and cheaper, and it's much more economical now to use the synthetic indigo than it is to use the natural. But people like to use the natural. There's no difference in the chemical whatsoever, but it's the preference of having synthetic or natural. With 6,6 Dibromo indigo tin, if you buy, I think it's 1 gram, it's about £6,000. So I don't think, even now, many people are going to bother with the Tyrian purple. There is a man out in Tunisia called Mohamed Ghassan Noura, who is actually producing it and will sell you some of the, that's natural, he will sell you some of the Tyrian purple. So, what have we got next? Substantive dyes. Substantive dyes are ones that can fix themselves. So they have a natural affinity to the fibres, and it's mainly the ones that have got tannin in them. So something like kutch or wattle, oak gall, buckthorn bark, pomegranate skins, as I've said there. Pomegranate skins are a fantastic dye, absolutely fabulous dye, very yellow, but also they'll give you good fawns and things. You'll see some pomegranate in a minute. But it is the tannin that's doing the work. The tannin will actually fix. So, adjective dyes. What are adjective dyes? The majority of dyes come under this type. Most dyes are adjective. They need something to help them to fix to the fibres. This is known as a mordant. Right, what's a mordant? Let's have a look. Need to turn the page. Mordant is a word that comes originally from the Latin mordere, which means to bite. It's also the same word in French. And if we go back to the French Dyers again, you remember there was a book by Monsieur Berthollet. That book got translated into the English by William Hamilton, who was a doctor. And in his translation, he didn't know an English word that he could use for the word mordant, which is the French word. So he actually used mordant, and that's what's come into English. So I think there is a lot of confusion when you're reading books, particularly historical books. Some say Latin, some say French, and I think the confusion comes from that. I think both are probably correct, but the original comes from the Latin. That's my excuse anyway. Right. Protein fibres need a mordant bath that is acidic, and cellulose fibres need the mordant bath to be alkaline. So when you're working with the different types of fibres, you need to know which one how you're going to mordant and how you're going to make it work. So, mordant, what is it? Right. This is alum. This is a lump of natural alum. It is actually potassium aluminium sulfate, and it's probably the most common mordant that is used. And as you can see, it has been known for rather a long time, as we've got it there in cuneiform. Alum is usually a hydrated double sulfate salt of aluminium, but actually aluminium sulfate also gets called alum. And it's the aluminium that is considered to be the bonding point. It's the aluminium you're looking for. And you can get natural plant accumulators of aluminium as well. So at different periods of history and in different places, if they couldn't get hold of alum, they would then use something like club moss, or you might have seen, if you're a modern dyer, you might have seen Simplicos coming in from Japan, and that again is an aluminium accumulator. Other metal mordants that have been used are iron, copper, tin. They all have an effect on the colour. So alum itself will not actually affect the colour very much, but iron will sadden it, it will make it go darker. So if I show you that, and that's the same dark stuff, but that's just alum mordanted. Oh no, that's the Brazilian one we do, that's the iron. That's the iron one. Can you see how much it's changed the colours? Green's not on the floor. That's Lincoln green, by the way, it's just dropped on the floor. Copper brightens, and tin also. Thank you, Adam. It's very well. Tin also brightens. There's also a story that goes with tin. In 1606-ish, a man called Cornelius Drebbel had on his windowsill some cochineal in a little glass tube because he was going to make some thermometers. And on the leaded windows where they do the tinning, the tin was getting wet from the condensation and it was dripping into the cochineal, and he noticed that the red was getting brighter and brighter and brighter as it dripped into the cochineal. So it became a very specific scarlet colour to use cochineal with tin. So, right. The main dye groups, we've got chemicals again. We hope you're all taking in this chemistry. So the yellow dyes are mainly flavonoids, and we've even got a description of the chemicals. We've got luteolin and apigenin on weld, and that luteolin is the bit that gives us the faster dye. So if you haven't got luteolin in your yellow, you won't get a dye that fixes well. If you've just got a pigeon in, or you've just got the genistin, or you've just got one of the other yellows, you will not get as good a fix on your yellows. The red dyes are anthraquinones. Madder is probably the one that most people know. I usually get children coming running up to me when I'm talking about cochineal, and I ask them whether they eat pink sweets or whether they like pink icing on their cakes, and they all go, yeah, are you going to offer me a sweet? You know, and I go, no, you're eating little cochineal beetles. You don't like that then. Brazil wood is something that was very popular in the Middle Ages. It is a stunningly dark red dye. That was the hank over here. This one, really dark crimson. It actually is not very light fast, unfortunately, but they would use it quite often as a base for the kermes because it then means you have a lot less of the expensive dye to use. They were very practical, the old dyers, and also, I don't know if you know, Brazil got named for the dye stuff. So when the Portuguese landed on the shores of Brazil, they looked around, saw the trees, and they used to be known as fire trees. So they said, oh look, Brazil, and that's how the country got named. So logwood's been mentioned before. Logwood came in from the New World, from the Bay of Campeche, sometimes known as Campeche wood. And when it first came in, it was banned. Queen Elizabeth I, there's a statute from 1582 and 1588 completely banning its use because it's an inferior blue, because they thought with the logwood that they were going to use it as a replacement for the indigo. They thought they'd found an extra blue, you know, another way, a cheaper way of producing blue. And then they realised that actually, if you mix it with iron, you get a really, really good black. And then a little later on, when you get to the 18th and 19th century and the chrome wood comes in, they started using it with chrome, and then you get jet black. And logwood was used really right through to about the 1960s as the main black dye rather than the synthetic in a lot of different dye houses. So, commercial viability of natural dyes. This is where I get the carpets in. I used to have, in the house I grew up in, carpet like this. This is actually a sample of the carpet that used to be in the house. My parents bought this carpet in 1968, and it's a Crossley Sultana carpet. And Crossley Sultana used to be the best carpet that you can possibly buy. And my mother was having the best carpet in our house. And Crossley carpets, I presume most of you are from the area. Do you know about Crossley carpets in Halifax? Big business. When they went, a small company called Avena Carpets actually took on many of their looms and stayed in a little area of the Crossley Carpets factory. I happened to make a comment about having this carpet, and Andrew at the SDC used to go to Avena Carpets, and he was talking to the lady there and said, oh, haven't you got the archive for Crossley Carpets? And she said, yeah, we've got carpets that the designs that go back to the early 1800s. Would be nice if we could offer a choice of natural dyes or synthetic dyes. So Andrew introduced us to each other, we got together and we came up with a plan to try and, go back, go back, thank you. We came up with a plan. So, one's natural, one's synthetic. than the right way around. Can you tell the difference? Do you want me to pass them round? It tells you on the back, but so this is the natural one. You've got logwood black, you've got fustic in the centre. This is pomegranate and madder as the design there. So the gentleman on the left is the synthetic dyer that worked at Avigna, and he reproduced the colours in exactly the same in synthetics. And we did these, so that's the madder here coming out of the dye vat. And do you want to pass them around? Yeah. And then we sent them off to be checked for light fastness, wash fastness, and rub fastness. And in terms of light fastness, they're both exactly the same. I've got the results here. For rub fastness, there is slight differences, and for wash fastness, there's slight differences. But both of them we decided would be solvable because we knew where the issue had come from. So it is possible to have, or it would have been possible, apart from she decided to close the business. It would have been possible to actually have a choice of carpet in either natural or synthetic colours. Right, where are we going next? Oh, I know, it's that one. Right, so actually in production, we have herdware. Here we have e-colour. This is e-cardigan dyed in madder, commercially, locally at Liversidge, dye house down in Liversidge. So this cardigan is, they aren't wearing the same design on the advert there, but they are actually in production. You can buy them very easily. Also, AO Textiles down in London are working with Gainsborough silk weavers, and they've just been to the Future Fashion Symposium with Gainsborough, and apparently have had a very successful day. But they're producing all these different styles of silk damask and designs, and they've also had various fashion designers asking them to dye various things as well. So you can see they're getting a nice range of colours. They also say that they have their own process which is unique, so I've no idea what they're doing in their production, but if you follow them on Instagram, you can see some of their process actually in the dye works. It's quite hypnotic, as they say, to watch it. So, natural dyes and sustainability. This is where I get controversial, although I think Hannah might agree with me here. No one really knows how green natural dyes are, because they do use a heck of a lot of water. We haven't actually worked out a way of doing that. There's controversy over using aluminium as a mordant. It's a heavy metal, everyone says, and aluminium could be a sign of a lead on to Alzheimer's, and we could have various problems with the copper or the tin. So, you know, there's lots of things there. And if you don't use the heavy metals, or the metals, then what are you going to use? Well, if you're going to use oxalic acid, I think you'll find that Bella mentioned that oxalic acid isn't that pleasant to use either. So, you know, I'd rather use alum than use the oxalic acid, really. There is no current industry recognised training in natural dyes. So if you're going to use natural dyes in your dye house, how do you know that it's being done correctly? How do you know that what you're doing is environmentally sound? If you use a lot of aluminium, how much is actually going onto the fibre? How much is actually going into the effluent? And effluent in an industrial dye house is very important. They pay for what's going into the water that shouldn't be. They pay a fee. The interesting one to me is that everyone is an expert, even if they've only been on a one-day workshop. Natural dyes are so simple to use that anyone can do it. And there's an element of that, and it's great to have a play, but if you're going to take it into industry, you need to know more. So I, being the nosy thing that I am, wanted to know a lot more, and I have a lot of questions about the mordanting process. So I am currently a PhD student at Leeds University, and I taught them with Professor Carl and Muriel Rigu. I really want to know more about what is actually happening in the mordanting process and whether we can improve it and whether we can actually get zero going to effluent, and what's the best way of doing it, and can we completely exhaust the dyes as well as the aluminium, and do some dyes need more and do some dyes need less? There's an awful lot of questions within whatever we're doing in the processes. Did that move from them? That bit. Right. There's a company in London that may interest some people. Sophie's London. They're a new start-up business from the University of the Arts in London, and they've just been awarded funding of over £150,000 from NASA to actually look into the use of food waste as dye. Because actually, as I think it was Hannah mentioned, if we're going to use natural dyes instead of synthetic dyes, do we eat or do we colour? Which do we do? Because we've not got enough land to do both. So if we can actually get the food waste dyes to give us better colour, to actually fix better, then we've got an opportunity to actually stop so much going to landfill. There's all sorts of positives to go with it. So they've got this funding and they're looking into the extraction of the colour chemicals from food waste. And they're also looking for collaborators if people want to have a play with them. So there's that research going on. And excitingly for me, my supervisors and I have just been, well, we start today. Today, 1st of July, we start working with various European companies, various European countries on a very special research project for the next 3 years. And we're looking at supercritical carbon dioxide, we're looking at the bacterial dyes. The bacterial dyes are same dye chemicals as we're getting out of the plants, but they're being grown with bacteria, and that means that we can then produce just what we need for that dye lot. So there's an awful lot of research going on all the way through, and there's also the biomordants that we can look at as well. So as I said there, it's really good to know that history can still be the guide and influence the future. Many thanks, everybody. Thank you for your and I'll just put that up as well. If you want to get in touch with the SDC, they really are well worth being members of. I would have not got anywhere near as much information or done as well as I have.